First things first, it's important to note that INDEXMATCH is not one function. It's two separate functions, and what we're going to do is nest the match function inside of the index function. You're going to understand what that means in just a second. So let's get started. Just a quick explanation of my data. In column A, I've got a list of drinks. In column B, I've got the quantity that I sold. In column C, I really want to add the type so that I can see which type sold the most. And then in column H and I did kind of what like a table array would be for a Vlookup, where I listed every drink one time, and then I put if it's either a fruit drink or a milk drink. Now this is gonna make the most sense if we just focus on each function separately to start. So like I said, we've got the index function, the match function, and right now, let's just talk about the index function. I made a little area here to show you what we're doing, and to start out, I'm gonna type into my cell and I'm gonna go equals index with an open parentheses. And you can see when we open the parentheses, Excel tells you what it needs. And in this instance, it only needs an array and a row number. And for the array in this example, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna highlight from H2 down to H9, where all of the different types are listed out here. I'm gonna put a comma, and then the last thing we need to do is just enter a number, and that's gonna designate the row number. So if I put a 1 here, close the parentheses and click enter, you can see that it returns fruit. And the reason that it's doing that is because it's counting this area right here that I highlighted as number 1, because it's the first row in the area I highlighted. Now, if I were to go back in here and let's just say that I put a 4, you can see that it returns milk now, because again, it's the 4th row in the area that we highlighted. And of course, if I were to put an 8 here, it returns milk. And if I were to put any number, I'll list them all out here. You can see exactly what it would return. And that's pretty much all there is for the index function. Literally, you highlight an area, you put down a number, and it returns whatever is in that area. Which again, like I said at the beginning, pretty useless on its own. So now let's move on to the match function. I'm gonna go in the cell here, I'm gonna type equals match, open up the parentheses, and this function needs a little bit more. Not a lot, but a little bit. First thing it needs is a lookup value. So in this example, let's just say that I want it to look for the word orange drink. So I'm gonna just click A2 so I don't need to type it out. I'm gonna put a comma, and then it also says lookup array like before. And what this means is, where do you want me to look for the lookup value? I'll just highlight this area right here because I want it to look for the word orange drink in this area. The last thing that we need to enter is match type. And I'm always gonna put 0 here because I want it to look for exactly what I told it to. And more times than not, you're probably gonna put 0 as well. I'm gonna close the parentheses and then I'm gonna click enter. And you can see here that it returned 1. And again, very similar to index, the reason why it's returning 1 is because it sees the orange drink in the top row of that area that I highlighted. So let's just say that I didn't change anything except for I switched A2, I'm gonna switch it to A4 this time. So it's looking for milk here, but it's looking for milk in the same area. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna click enter, and it returns a 3 this time because it counts it as row 1, 2, 3. Of course, if I were to put peach, it would return number 6. And then I'll put the numbers here as well. You can tell whatever one I tell it to look for, it's going to return the corresponding number next to these cells. Now, like I said, these functions were fairly weak on their own, but when we combine them, we can make incredible things happen. Super quick and super important, we're going to need to make sure that we do the subscribe and like function by clicking the like button on the video that you're currently watching and making sure that you're subscribed if you haven't already. Back to Excel. We're going to want to go into the top cell that we want the type to appear in. So in my example here, I want the type to appear in cell C2. I'm going to double click in and I'm going to type equals index with an open parentheses, same as before. Also the same as before, we're going to go ahead and we're going to highlight the array that we want returned first. So what that means is I'm going to highlight the area here that's got all the different types of fruit next to all the different drink names. Now, one thing that's going to be really important later is anytime you're highlighting in an array, we want to make sure that there's $signs in front of both of the values. I'll explain why a little bit later, or it'll make more sense. But for now, the area that you highlight should have $signs in front of the letter and the number, similar to how I have it right here. I'm going to type a comma to move on to the row number, but this is where it's going to get a little bit crazy. Instead of typing a row number, I'm going to type out match and then open up the parentheses. And this is where we start to nest the match function inside of the index function. I'm I'm going to go ahead and for the lookup value, I'm going to click on orange drink. I'm going to put a comma here. And then for the lookup array, I'm going to highlight all of the different item names. It's important here to also put $signs, but we're not going to put it on the lookup value because it's not an array. So you're going to want it to just be on that initial array and then the one that we just typed out. And it's also important to note, we did it naturally here, but my lookup array and the match function, the drink names, is the same size as the array of the types, which of course makes sense because each drink has a type, but just something to note. I'm going to type a comma. I'm going to put a 0 again because it's an exact match. And then I'm going to put a parentheses to close the match function. And I'm going to do a parentheses one more time to close the index function. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click enter. And you can see that fruit appeared, which is awesome because I know that orange drink is a fruit. Now to make sure that this works properly, I'm going to click into where we just typed out. I'm going to move my cursor to the bottom right of that area. And when it switches to this little symbol, the kind of black T right here, I'm going to double click. And you can see that that drags the formula down on the spreadsheet. And it looks like everything is classified correctly at this point. Now this might be blowing your mind a little bit, and I want to make sure that you understand why this is happening. Even though the match function is inside of the index function, it still operates the same way that it would before. To break this down, you've got the index function, and remember it only wants two things. It wants to know what area you're looking for, and then it wants one number to dictate what row it's going to return. So what the match function is doing and where we placed it inside of the index match formula is the match function is just returning that one number that it's looking for. We know that this works because we set up our match function to look for the orange drink here or this cell and then return the corresponding value next to the type. So in this example here, the match function is looking for the orange drink. It knows that it's in cell 1 here, or row 1, I mean. And then it knows to tell the index function to return row 1 here. Let's go down to grape drink for another example. Our index function is looking in the G area here next to type. We've got the match function working to return what row number the index function should return, right? So we know that the match function is looking for the word grape drink. We know that the match function is going to find grape drink in cell, I think this was 7 here, row 7. So the index function is essentially saying, look in this area and then return row 7, which of course corresponds to fruit and grape drink. Now I think it's really important to understand how this is working, and that's what we just covered. But I also said in the beginning, I would just give you a 30-second overview if that's more helpful for you. So this is what our function looks like that we just typed out. In this area right here, you're gonna wanna type out your lookup value. In this area here, you're gonna tell Excel the lookup array. And then in this area right here, you're gonna tell Excel the return array. And that's about all there is to know about the index match function. I hope that you found this video helpful. If you still have some questions or feel like this doesn't work well for your scenario, check out the video here. It's called an Xlookup and is a newer function in Excel. It takes the same principles, but makes it a little bit more user-friendly, so you might find it useful. Thanks again for watching, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already.